Looks like we got a bigot contest going on in the presidential race, but thankfully we can laugh a little tonight with our terrific guest.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
Yeah, Bob Perlow's back. Last time he was here, he was talking about his book and all of his experiences with the sitcoms of America that he's helped to warm up audiences for. But the passing of Garry Marshall, the world famous director and producer and good friend of his, causes him to want to talk about Gary's book. And he's a welcome return guest here this evening, and you'll meet him coming up momentarily. So thank you for tuning in. Appreciate having you. Let us go to the rundown and check what's going on this Thursday, and that's what it seems to be. No, you're a bigot. No, you're a bigot. No, you're a bigot. No, you're a bigot. Here's the headline. So Donald Trump comes off the script and off the prompter and calls her a bigot. She responds and says, you know what, you're part of the alternate right. We've got another headline there, I think. I think we do. Yep. Now he's going to be tied to the alt-right world of radical conservatives. Most of you don't even know what the alt-right world is. Here's the first salvo, CBS.
Hillary Clinton is a bigot who sees people of color only as votes, not as human beings.
Donald Trump turned up the attacks on his political rival while insisting he is the candidate who will improve the lives of minorities with better jobs, schools, and safer communities. Hillary Clinton called in to CNN's AC360 last night to respond to Trump's name-calling.
And Donald Trump has shown us who he is, and we ought to believe him. He is taking a hate movement mainstream.
Clinton also defended her family foundation after an Associated Press report earlier this week suggested Clinton Foundation donors gained special access to her while she was Secretary of State.
My work as Secretary of State was not influenced by any outside forces. I made policy decisions based on what I thought was right.
Clinton returns to the campaign trail today in Reno.
Did you notice that woman on Donald's shoulder who was horrified? You know, when he used the bigot word. By the way, I'd rather have the word bigot being thrown around than racist. You know, because everyone's got a little bit of bigotry in them. And, you know, racism has been an overplayed systemic term that now we just stick on everybody because it seems to be, I don't know, the third rail weapon. Anyway, the Brexit leaders coming in for Donald Trump, and that's all part of what he's trying to do this week. But the response that Hillary has made on the Clinton Foundation is kind of interesting. This particular story combines both the Clinton Foundation response and this alternative accusation she has on Donald Trump.
There's a lot of smoke. And there's no fire.
In a phone call to CNN, Clinton said her meetings with humanitarians like Melinda Gates and Elie Wiesel had nothing to do with their donations to her family charity.
That is absurd. These are people I was proud to meet with.
In Atlanta, former President Bill Clinton argued the foundation was being targeted unfairly.
If there's something wrong with creating jobs and saving lives, I don't know what it is.
His wife will try to turn the focus back to Trump today by taking on one of his most controversial cheering squads.
We're going to make America great again.
Active online, they call themselves the alt-right. They call Trump the emperor, hailing his talk of a deportation force.
The alt-right is sort of an amorphous, nebulous internet world of white ethno-nationalists.
Betsy Woodruff of the Daily Beast has been writing about the alt or alternative right for 2 years, but the movement suddenly pierced the public consciousness last week.
Hillary Clinton is set to launch a full-fledged attack on the alt-right.
The alt-right, this alternative group of conservatives.
Sexist, racist, and anti-Semitic.
The trigger was Trump's decision to make Breitbart chairman Steve Bannon his new campaign CEO. Under Bannon's leadership, the conservative website has become what he called the platform for the alt-right, highlighting crimes committed by immigrants, criticized for anti-Muslim sentiments.
Is Donald Trump a member of the alt-right?
You know, they see him as a very admirable leader. They really like him. They see Trump as someone whose policies would be good for whites.
You know, I'm sure you got that whole definition of the alternative right, right? This presidential race is completely off the rails, no doubt about it. When's the last time we actually remember having anybody talk about taxes, spending, priorities, defense, in any kind of traditional fashion? It has been absolutely crazy. And if we're going to have a race conversation with this tone, I don't know how that helps anybody. Tomorrow night we'll have some local reaction to this claim of bigotry that's going back and forth, and see if we can make some kind of sense of it. In the meantime, just strap your helmet on here. We haven't hit Labor Day yet. Let's go to this. This is just terrible, and I bring this up only because I think the conversation may be getting out of hand just a little bit. The headline on this awful tragedy yesterday in Kennedy Plaza, where this young woman walked off the sidewalk and was hit by the bus. Here's the story that Channel 12 writes, and then we'll make a point about it.
Tonight, Bank of America tells us Michelle Cagnon worked for the financial institution in downtown Providence for 9 years. Colleagues there and family left grieving tonight. 30-year-old Michelle Cagnon of Cumberland died this morning when she was hit by a Peter Pan bus after 8 o'clock at Providence's Kennedy Plaza. That green bus towed from the scene. Police tell us the man behind the wheel when Cagnon was killed is Matthew Reedy of Taunton.
All I heard was a smack and she went underneath the bus.
Casey Lee was one of many eyewitnesses who said Cagnon was dragged. Police told our news partners at the Providence Journal it was 50 to 60 feet. Reedy was turning the bus left from Washington onto East Approach, a bus-only street that runs between the skating rink and Burnside Park.
The driver was doing about 15, 20. The woman was in the middle of the crosswalk.
Providence Public Safety Commissioner Stephen Perry confirmed those eyewitness reports.
It appears that this person was in the crosswalk, but we're reconstructing this video.
It will come down to that, no shortage of eyewitnesses, and Matthew Reedy.
What he saw, what he didn't see.
And Peter Pan tells us Reedy, 36 years old, underwent initial drug and alcohol tests. Those came back negative. They call him, the company does, a stellar driver with a good record who has been with Peter Pan for just a little over a year.
God bless her. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. Neither do you, other than, oh my gosh, that is awful, and pray for her, her family, the bus driver as well, who most likely is probably faultless other than some distraction. I pray, and there's no evidence to indicate so, but I just pray that she wasn't wearing a headset or was reading or distracted. And one of the things that I'm seeing more and more of, regardless if this is germane to this particular tragedy, people just walking around the city clueless, running with headsets on, walking across streets with headsets on, in kind of an alternative universe while the world is moving around on wheels. It's very dangerous. So hopefully there's no association to this story, but think about what you're doing downtown. Think about what you're doing anywhere when it comes to running or walking with things that can distract you. There's a headline in the Journal today and then a sub list of things that have happened with buses, and I just wanted to bring it up. We don't have to go down through it. There were 2, major accidents, fatals in 2014, 2 in 2015, and now 4 in 2016. I think we ought to be careful in compiling, RIPTA stories with the Peter Pan bus thing that happened yesterday. They're not always the same, and we don't make these lists when it comes to car accidents. Right, so there's kind of a gang up on the bus industry right now, and maybe some discussion logistically about moving buses out of that center of town for now until there's a better depot established there. But cool heads need to be prevailing in terms of analysis as to what to do next and what happened here. But please, regardless of this story and its tragedy, be careful walking around town. Be aware, right? All right, on a much more, well, this is somber in a way. Gary Marshall, 81 years of age, passed away this summer. The headline on this particular discussion comes from Bob Perlow on an op-ed piece that he wrote, How Gary Marshall Changed My Life. Bob's been here before to talk about Gary. Here's a summary of Gary's life, and then Bob will talk about his book and a big deal coming up this week, actually tomorrow night.
In his many successful sitcoms and films, Gary Marshall's trademark was always human comedy.
No.
I tried once to blow something up. I don't blow things up well.
Gary found ways to make you want to run to work.
Director Ron Howard first encountered Marshall when he was a child star on The Andy Griffith Show.
And Gary had been doing the Dick Van Dyke Show on that same lot.
Did you know each other?
I knew who he was.
Marshall would later cast Howard in a sitcom he created set in the 1950s.
Sunday, Monday, Happy Days.
Launched in 1974, Happy Days would run for 10 years.
Gary was the best boss I've ever had. He could lead a group of people to be their best selves.
He did it again with a string of hits. Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, dominating prime time for more than a decade.
He seemed to hit a nerve in this country.
You know, he could have kept going as a dominant figure in television. But he really wanted to make movies.
On film, he gave us Pretty Woman and The Princess Diaries, and always mentored his actors.
You want to go in and pitch a comedy to a network?
Yeah.
You know, in your pitch, just curse a lot. And it worked. I sold a couple of pilots that way as a producer.
Marshall was an actor too, often playing the studio executives he made fun of.
You know the words I like? I like the word peppy and the word cheap. Peppy and cheap.
Any of us who were beginning to have some success in the business, he would say, just don't ever forget, life is more important than show business.
It's nice to be important, Gary Marshall once said.
Cut!
It's more important to be nice.
He was a good guy, huh?
Actually, one of the best. And I was lucky that he was the first. I said, wow, I guess everyone's like that. Not so much. He was the only one.
Well, I think you write that in your op-ed piece, which I have read, but I don't have handy. It's that, listen, when people pass away, he was a good guy, da, 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 da. But you say those cliches that sometimes roll off people's tongues were more than pertinent when it comes to describing Gary Marshall.
Yeah, you know what comes to mind? They go, when Hitler died, they go, you know what? Loved kids, good with dogs. Yes, he killed a few people, but what a guy with kids. Gary, on the other hand, good all the way through. This is a book that he gave me, a nice inscription.
Well, the book is, Gary Marshall. I mean, he wrote this back a while ago, correct?
Yeah. This was.
But he wrote to you, Bob. Keep them laughing in all media, and wish you happy days, because you're a funny guy. That means a lot to you.
That'll go right here. I mean, this is an icon. This guy was special. If it's okay for me to, when I knew I was coming here, I just jotted down some things.
You know what? I don't want to race through them. I have to pause. When we come back, we're going to jot down some things. Bob's got an event coming up tomorrow night as well that you need to know about. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk about Gary Marshall. The famous Gary Marshall, and Bob is. I'm sure you were heartbroken when his passing came in July.
Devastating. One of those things that really affects you. A guy that started me on a career that lasted close to 40 years, and I go, one of the good ones is gone.
We've talked about your start in this career, and if you're been sleeping under a rock for the last 4 decades, Bob's thing was to warm up audiences. I mean, you've done a lot of comedy, period, but your major thrust in your whole career and your whole book was about the sitcoms that you would warm people up for. There's the book that we talked about last time Bob was on, The Warm-Up Guy, and I mean, you worked on Happy Days. You worked on
Happy
Laverne
Days,
and Shirley.
Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, The Odd Couple, Joni Loves Chachi, Angie, and that was just at one time.
I'm holding my phone for a reason. This is something we haven't done. This is a first on the TV show, playing something
radio.
into my microphone, because this is what Lexi told me to do. But what am I hearing here?
Yeah, let me set this up.
Yeah.
One night on Laverne and Shirley, I was a fledgling writer. By the way, becoming a writer, my first job as a writer, I got to work with Gary Marshall. I had never written before. This is almost like somebody doing finger paints and going, why do you work with that guy? What's his name? Picasso. He'll teach you a lot. I got to work with Gary Marshall. But one night on Laverne and Shirley, he said something that changed the whole course of my life. This was 1976. And Laverne and Shirley was going to tape that night. It was a Friday night. The audience was dark. You heard the drum roll. Gary came up to me 5 minutes before the show. This is not from that night. I went to him 5 years ago and said, Gary, I don't know if you remember this, but you said something that night that changed my life. He goes, I'll do it again. and this is him.
And this is, so we don't have it on, we just have it here. Hold on a second. Here.
Hey, Bob, Julian's a little dead tonight. Go out and talk to them. Go ahead. Be funny.
That's it.
Be funny.
And I was for the next 35 years.
But what you're saying is he just, out of the blue, launched your career by saying, listen, the audience is dead, go do it.
Yeah.
And you didn't know what you were doing.
I had an idea. I had seen shows before. What they did up until that time, they would use a writer on all these different shows that were not comics. They didn't even want to be out there. Most writers are introverted. I'll write. I don't want to be in front of people. I go, whoa, this is fun. Drum roll. I went out and go, hey, how you doing? And I liked it. So I kept on doing it and made a career of it, wrote a book about it,
Right.
Still do it.
So what is what's the summary on the Gary Marshall story?
It's a life to be revered. It's just one of those special people, and his credo, and I live by it to this day, life is more important than show business. He goes, yep, it's a nice job, we're lucky to be in it, but you know what? Life is better. So make sure you have a life. Don't make show business your life.
Kind of a syndrome in the business that people get so focused on achieving inside it that they forget everything else?
Most do. He was the exception and special, and everyone, me included, loved this guy. He made it fun, but also went by the tenet that life is more important. The show business is a job. It should be fun, but live your life. Have fun with it.
You know, there are a lot of people that are, I don't know, in that broke the mold category. Like, they're unique, they're not to be repeated, they couldn't be. And we're all like that. Life's, we're all snowflakes, right? But he represents a time in the industry that may not be replicated again, correct?
I've been back in Rhode Island now for 6 years, but I'm in close contact with most of my friends I've made out there. No, there is not another Gary Marshall. He was special. He was kind. He helped so many people, myself included. But Fonzie, Robin Williams, Richard Gere, Al Pacino, the list goes on, and nobody has a bad thing to say about Gary. I feel in real elite company when it comes to that.
And the stuff that he produced and all these sitcoms, I mean, the world has changed. There's more platforms now. The competition is more severe. The attention span for viewers and listeners to media, readers of media, is more bifurcated. Right place, right time in the industry for him, obviously?
Yes and no. Right time because sitcoms were at their zenith. And I wrote down he had Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, Joni Loves Chachi, The Odd Couple, Angie, all at the same time. He had 6 staffs writing. I mean, something he would do, and we'd be in a writers' meeting. There'd be 15 people. What are we going to do? It's 9 o'clock at night. We need jokes. He would stick his head in. Remember, he had 6 of these going at the same time. He goes, "Hey, listen, Fonzie wears a hat," and then leave. Knowing farewell that the writers were so good, they go, "Oh, we're going to be here till 3 in the morning, but so what? We're going to do an episode." Well, Fonzie wears glasses, which is even more important because now when he wore glasses, the next day, kids all over the country would go to their optometrist. So it was a lesson to be learned. Good stuff, good family value stuff, not like a lot today with some of the shows I could mention but won't. But Fonzie wears a hat. Next day, everyone wears a hat. Go to the next thing. Mork learns a lesson, and all the writers go, "No, we're here. Let's order some food because we're going to be here a while." But he would go to each thing and say, "Oh, I have an idea. Why don't you guys run with it?" But that's having faith in your writing staff. But he would actually do that.
Yeah, I would imagine. When we come back, Bob's got a performance tomorrow night you got to know about. Stay with us.
And then
Bob's got notes. You can see he's still working on his notes, everything you want to say about Gary Marshall. You just told a funny story about how we try to keep it real with Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah, writers are usually educated people, and they want to smarten up a character. And one of my friends wrote a thing where Penny Marshall would say, "Well, I don't think that would happen to me because..."
That's the writing staff. Sorry to interrupt. That's the writing staff for Laverne and Shirley, I think, right? Isn't
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That's me in the background.
Right.
And the person to my left and your right is Jeff Franklin, who created Full House.
Got it.
He now lives in a house with 18 bathrooms.
Because he created Full House.
Created Full House.
Right. But you were saying about the end of the story there, in terms of the writing.
Yeah. Try not to make the characters more than they are. We had one instance where a writer said for Penny's character, "Well, I don't think that should happen that way, Cindy." And Gary walked in and goes, "No, don't do that." Penny would say, and you heard how Gary speaks, that New York clipped accent, "I don't think so, Penny." That's the way, and he goes, but that's not grammatically correct. He goes, "That's the way they talk." And they did. They spoke in a certain way. They were from Minneapolis at the brewery company, and that's the way they talk. Write the way they talk. Don't write the way that you think a book should be.
So you've been out of the warm-up game for how long now?
I've been back to Narragansett now 6 years.
Miss it?
Yeah, but do I miss it? Yeah. However, last week there was something that I wouldn't miss. The Playboy Mansion closed. Luckily, and guys of a certain age go, "Oh, the Playboy Mansion. I wonder what it's like." I know what it's like. It was everything that we grew up saying, "Well, that would be fun." It's sexist now. It's not politically correct. But you know what?
I think we need to reschedule for another show and just completely focus on the Playboy Mansion. Speaking of shows, you got one coming up tomorrow night in South County, the Courthouse Center for the Arts, which is in West Kingston. Tales from Hollywood. What are you going to do?
What happens is the audience comes in, they're given a list of over 200 shows and celebrities that I've met that I luckily have photos of and videos of, and I have inside stories. There are no secondhand stories. I say, "I'll tell you what really happened. This is behind the scenes." And the money, the proceeds go to the center to help children's programs, so it's a good thing. It's $15. Come down, we'll talk. It's nice. I have my book. You want to buy the book? It'll be fun.
Yeah, well, people love to hear that behind-the-scenes stuff of the shows that they all grew up watching. We just don't have, unless I'm mistaken, we don't have that family time in those appointment viewing anymore. Platforms, digital choices, the way we watch media has changed. It's kind of a throwback. A lot of people miss those days.
Yeah, they do. I mean, the producers today, the writers, they want to be hipper than thou. They have their thing. Oh, let's be dirty. We can do this. To bring up a name, Chuck Lorre, who has 2.5 Men, Mom, Mike and Molly, a bunch of those shows, and they really skirt that issue. Gary had a philosophy. He goes, you know, families watch this. Let's be nice. The kids are nice. They're not into the stuff that he's putting on TV.
More reflection from Bob and his show tomorrow night in West Kingston. Make sure you check it out. Always good to see you, my friend. Appreciate
Always.
it. All righty. When we come back, final word. Tell you about tomorrow night. Stay with us.